Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the January 22nd, 2020 meeting of the Danville-Boyle County Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you for your presence. Appreciate you being here. We'll begin in prayer. Our God and Father in heaven, we thank Thee for this most beautiful day and all the blessings of it, the health You've given us, and allow us to live another day and enjoy Your creation. We thank Thee for this community we live in, this country we live in, the freedoms we enjoy, and all the blessings You bestowed upon us. We continue to pray for our servicemen and women. You would watch over and care for, protect them, and bring them home as soon as possible. We pray for our government as it's in turmoil at this time, that those conflicts could be resolved, that they could come together as a country, as a government, and unite us as a country and a people, return us back to that moral country You have us to be. Continue to watch over and care for us, guide, guard, direct us, help us to make decisions this day or for betterment for this community and all those involved. Bless us in all things. In Christ's name we pray, amen. Item B, approval of minutes, December 5th, 2019.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Terry moves we approve,
Second.
and Jim seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve minutes. Hearing none, all in favor, vote unanimous. Item C, financial report. Steve, you want to give that, please?
Yeah, I'll keep that kind of light, and just point out that there's 2 months, as you all know. We had to have a special call meeting in December, and so you have your November finance report and your December finance report in your packet. They would both need to be approved. Nothing in particular I'll point out, because we're going to actually do a budget amendment later in the meeting, and Terry's going to walk us through a detailed mid-year kind of analysis and justification for some budget amendment items. But I'd be glad to answer any specifics on the December or November finance report, but they're both in your packet.
Questions on the financial reports?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Hearing none, Susie moves that we approve both the November and December financial reports as presented. Need a second and seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none, all in favor, vote unanimous. Thank you. Item D, construction sureties, BCIF, IJW whiskey release.
Yep. So every month, as you all know, we typically have this sureties report in your packet of the cash bonds we're holding, as well as the letter of credit. We've got some action kind of happening this month, so the next 3 items are kind of under the sureties report. 2 of them are releases, one's a partial release, and then one we're adding. So I'll walk you through those. They would all need your action independently. The first one, as you heard, is the Boyle County Industrial Foundation. We had a letter of credit in the amount of $32,000 for a Waterline project related to the IJW whiskey project. This is year 2 of that 3-year letter of credit process, and the project, I was email sent to me by Mr. Jody Lassiter. City engineer confirmed that the Waterline project was pretty much complete, and a letter of credit can be released at this time. So again, with your all's approval, we can kind of send that letter of credit back to the bank and close out that project.
Questions? Motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve.
Terry moves we approve.
I'll second.
Susie seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none, all in favor, vote unanimous. Number 2, Hunt Farm, sections 1, 2, and 3, reduced cash bond, amount of $22,037.20.
Yeah, this one is something we've been waiting to get to for a while. As you all remember, we ended up working out a developer agreement with Mr. Jody Sharp for Hunt Farm sections 1, 2, and 3. And again, I put that up on the, we're actually going to have a plat later in the meeting, but I put that up, up on the screen so you guys could see. That's this section right here, all the platted lots. And as you all know, we ended up paving the street. We were holding $51,000 in cash bond. It was a developer's bond that was called in 2011. We ended up paving that street with a coordinated effort with the county and the developer. The developer was required to put the sidewalks in, and we retained that cash bond while he was putting in the sidewalks. Actually, the sidewalk bond that we agreed to would have only been $23,478, but we left all the money in there to see where we were with the paving. We built a temporary hammerhead at the end of that subdivision before the next phase was constructed. So the developer was okay with leaving all the money in there, even though we probably had more than we needed for the sidewalk construction. He has pretty much got these sidewalks knocked out. We went out there and looked at it. There's just really just a handful of lots that still need sidewalks. Most of those houses are actually under construction, so those sidewalks are coming our way pretty quick. So what we're proposing today is to do a partial release of that cash bond in the amount of $22,037.20, and we will retain $81.20 plus a 10% contingency, which gives us $89.32. So we're going to keep $8,932 in the surety account until those last sections are done and the developer can get a release of that portion. But this would be releasing all the money back to him for what's completed and the excess money on the paving at this point in time. Mr. Sharp's here if you have any questions, but the project's going good. If you haven't been out there, there's a lot of construction happening. And in fact, the next item is to post a new letter of credit for a new phase of this, as well as approve a plat later in the meeting. So again, I'll be glad to go back through that. It's pretty quick. Again, this is the sidewalk bond, and this is a partial cash release of the developer's money.
Questions? Jim moves we approve,
I'll second.
and Terry seconds. Question on the motion to approve? Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Item 3, the Hunt Farm, Section 4.
Yeah, that was-
Accept initial LOC, reduced amount of 11.5.
Yep, so this was added on the agenda as that's why the agenda's revised at your seat. We thought this might hit the agenda, but we actually had some things we had to work out before we could get that on the agenda. But this is the plat that you're going to see in just a few minutes under the final plat. This plat went through technical review. You can see it right there up on the screen in June. So this plat went through, this is Hunt Farm Section 4, another 15 lots, with you just see a cul-de-sac going on the map. That basically is this area right here. So the developer's proposing to kind of fill out some lots on this section. It's just 15 lots, and the unique part of this, though, like the prior one where we had to pave the streets and we had some issues, our new subdivision regs now require several new tools to assure we get compliance and we get projects finished timely, one of which is obviously the preliminary plat, which as you see. The next step would be construction plans, which we got shortly after that the county approved. And then there's a letter of credit. There is a contract now, and there is a fee. So Mr. Sharp paid the fee last week. The contract was signed. His attorney wordsmithed it some. Henry wordsmithed it some. The contract is there at your seats as just a model. You'll see the contract. If you're curious, that's not the specific one we signed with Mr. Sharp, but that is now the developer contract we require whenever a bond is being posted. It protects both us and the developer. It also establishes a warranty period for subdivision construction. And Mr. Sharp, taking advantage of some good weather this fall, went out there and built everything. So everything is built today. The street is 100% built, curb, gutter, except the sidewalks. So the initial letter of credit was $217,000. Let's see here, $217,692 in improvements that you see right there. All of those have been constructed or in place. County's already looked at them. They're ready to be accepted, except the sidewalks. So this item's doing two things. A, to post a letter of credit for what's left, which is a 700 feet of sidewalk, that you can see on the plan right there, and authorize our chairman to sign this contract with the developer. That's something new we've never done in the past on projects like this. We now will have a developer contract anytime we're posting a bond. So that's what you're approving, is give the chairman authority to sign the contract, as well as accept that letter of credit from Mr. Sharp and Farmers Bank in the amount of $11,500 for sidewalks. And again, I'll be glad to answer any questions. The final plat is further on down the agenda. You guys have to approve that before it can be recorded. But all these other steps had to be in place before we can get to the final plat. And we've been working on this since June. Get all this done.
Questions?
Move we approve.
Terry moves we approve.
I'll second.
Susie seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve? Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, under subdivision approvals, letter E, Parksville Baptist Church, applied for approval of subdivision, tract of land containing 1.185 acres, Alum Springs, 6596 Road.
Gonna let Lisa handle the plats there.
Parksville Baptist Church plat, the property is zoned neighborhood business. It's proposed site for Dollar General store. It's at Alum Springs, Attville Road, at Cemetery Street, Parksville. The purpose of the plat is to denote a 10-foot water line easement, and it also marks the building lines and setbacks as adjusted by the BOA's variance granted November 20th, 2019.
Questions, discussion? Everything in order, Lisa?
Yes.
Thank you.
I make a motion to approve.
Susie moves we approve. And seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Item 2, Hillendale Apartments LLC, subdivision approval, tract of land, approximately 6.6 acres, 200 North Hillendale, Danville.
The Hillendale plat, the property is zoned multifamily residential RM3. This plat divides the property of D-Book 514, page 192, into lot 1 at 2.265 acres and lot 2 at 4.428 acres. There are 2 multifamily units that exist on lot 1. Lot 2 is currently vacant. Lot 1 meets the RM3 minimum lot area for its existing units, and the combined footprint area of the existing units do not exceed the 8% lot coverage maximum. The existing units are within current setbacks. This plat has received preliminary approval and ready to sign today.
Thank you. Question, discussion on the request?
I move to approve.
Susie moves we approve.
I'll second.
And Terry seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Item 3, Jody Sharp Construction, subdivision of plat approval, 8.299 acres at Zero Max Cavernous Road, Danville.
I'll do that one since that was already up. Again, not much more to say. You heard the technical parts. There's the plat. It's gone through preliminary approval in June of 19. It met all our requirements. Interesting enough, at that point in time, it was zoned GRA. And as you know, with the new zoning ordinance revision, GRA converted to R1A. Still same standards, 10,000 square foot minimum lot, 25-foot front setback, 10-foot sides, 10-foot rear. And in development, as you can see, the lots are all exceed probably that minimum. They're of the same nature as the development, although those lots to the cul-de-sac side obviously are much larger as it kind of fills out that remnant piece of this part of the farm. These lots are more in line with the development. So again, the 15 lots zoned R1A, single family. Preliminary approval meets all our requirements of the subregs and is ready to be recorded with your approval.
Questions? Motion to approve. Steve moves that we approve. Wendy seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve. Hearing none. All in favor? Vote unanimous. Thank you. Item F, public hearings. Steve, you want to?
Yep. I'll jump into those. We got 4 public hearings. The first 2 relate to zoning ordinances, and I know you guys have heard enough about that. But this one here, I just put the item on the screen. It says Junction City. So interesting enough, as you know, we've revised the complete ordinance for the city of Danville, Perryville, and Boyle County. And Junction City has been working on this for a while, coming back in the fold for subregs, comp plan, future land use map, and a few other things. The last step was to get a zoning ordinance adopted. We broke this out separate than the other governments because A, we did the other ordinance in 2 phases. It'd been hard to adopt half an ordinance for them. And B, they actually formed a committee and walked through all the new proposal, page by page by page, and are 100% in agreement with the new revised ordinance. So there's a bound version at your seat. We sent it out in November, but we didn't have a quorum, so we couldn't meet. We had to re-advertise the hearing, so we have to have a formal public hearing on the Junction City zoning ordinance, Articles 1 through 7. So it's at your seat. I don't think there's much to discuss because we've talked about the zoning ordinance for over a year. It's identical to the other three governments. The only difference is, as you know, Junction City, well, I'll leave that up there. Junction City also has a map. So when, in 2011, I hate to use this term, but when zoning went dark in that part of the county, the zoning map did too. So they are bringing a zoning ordinance back forward as well as a zoning map. So the map went out in your packet, and it's folded there. We're bringing the map back just like it was, except the back part of Shelby Green, where there's been dozens of homes built since 2011. We are going to show that as single family. So the Junction City Map Committee and City Commission has worked on this for several months. City Council, I'm sorry, has worked on this for several months, and this is their proposal to you all. So what we're doing is we're bringing a zoning ordinance forward to send them to recommend to adopt. We're bringing their zoning map back in a converted fashion, and we're relabeling the back half of Shelby Green to R1A. And all of that, if you guys see fit, we'd send down to their city to formalize through an ordinance adoption.
Okay. Thank you. Questions for Steve with regard to this? Okay, this being a public hearing, we certainly open the floor to public comments. And if anyone would like to speak in favor or in opposition to this proposal, you need to come to the mic, identify yourself, name and address, please. So anyone in the audience like to speak in favor or in opposition to this proposal being planned for Junction City and get them back in the fold? Hearing none, we would declare then the public hearing closed for this item, and the floor is now open for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Susie moves we approve,
I'll second.
and Terry seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah.
might jump in.
Yes, sir.
The statutes require that we offer some reasons for our approval.
Okay.
And I think it's appropriate to adopt the reasons that supported prior iterations of this zoning ordinance in the planning unit, and also to create uniformity of zoning regulation throughout the planning unit, if you accept that as an addition to your motion.
What he said.
You okay with that, Terry, as well? All right. So that is the motion with regard to that statement. Question, discussion on the motion then to approve. Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Thank you. Public hearing on item number 2, Danville-Boyle County Planning and Zoning Commission filed application to amend Articles 4 and 5 of Boyle County Joint Zoning Ordinance.
All right, so let me tell you what we got going on here. The county is now amending the ordinance they just passed. The reason for that is a couple things. As you know, when we sent our recommendation to the governments, we approved the new zoning ordinance for the city of Danville and Boyle County August 28th. We sent it to them right after Labor Day. They spent the whole 90 days, and as you all know, the state law says when you all make a recommendation on a zone change or a text amendment, the government has to act within 90 days. In absence of that, your recommendation takes the effect of law. So the city ran it all the way down to the 90th day. They debated the ordinance substantially. They made some changes. So did the county, most on the issues of Airbnb. Unfortunately, the county didn't meet the 90-day requirement. The county has to advertise ordinance readings, and their advertisement didn't work out timely for them, so they missed the 90-day cutoff. So in effect, the zoning ordinance in the county went into effect on November 27th, 2019, the 91st day. The goal was for them to pass it, make an effective date of 1/1/2020. Like the city did, they didn't get it done in time. So in effect, they didn't get the changes that they made in-house on the Airbnbs. So what you got before you is an amendment to their brand-new ordinance to do two things. Number one, it brings them in line with some changes the city made related to sign heights, commercial sign heights. That's not a big deal really in the county, but it makes the ordinance uniform, at least in that aspect. The city debated a little bit about commercial heights of building. I said signs, I'm sorry, building heights. So the city put some standards in there, different than your recommendation, that were more specific. We worked with the fire department on those, and they were good fixes. And then the Airbnb stuff was batted around, short-term rentals in every direction. Should we allow it in the county? Should we not allow it in the county? Should it happen in single family, not in single family? The county ended up landing, they would like it to be a conditional use in the county, not permitted by right. So when you get to those pages in Article 5, that's the main change, is getting it in line with what the county desires short-term rentals to be in the county. So we're making an amendment shortly after they've adopted this to get the Airbnbs in line with the way they see they need to operate in the county, which would be a conditional use permit, following the same rules. And then we had to change the other pages for bed and breakfast and short-term rentals, again, to make those conditional. Our original proposal was allow those by right in the ag district. The county chose to ratchet those down just a tad bit. And that's in line with the city to some degree, too.
Okay. Questions for Steve on this? Hearing none, this again being a public hearing on the item. If anyone would like to speak in favor of this proposal or in opposition, please come to the mic, identify yourself. Hearing no one, we would consider then the public hearing closed. Floor is open for a motion.
I move we approve.
Terry moves we approve.
I'll second.
Susie seconds. Questions, discussion on the motion to approve? Hearing none, all in favor, vote unanimous. Item 3, LMD Holdings LLC and AFI 005 LLC has filed application to rezone property on a tract of land containing approximately 271.092 acres located 1695 Lancaster Road and 871 East Main Street and 867 East Main Streets, 80 Old Lancaster Road, Danville.
Alrighty, this is a public hearing for a zone change request, as you heard the chairman describe. There's a lot to this, so I'm gonna work from the staff report. If you've got your staff report in your packet or at your seat, I am gonna reference page numbers and walk you through some items in the staff report. It should say zone change report at the top. And the other public hearing is a future land use, that'll be next. So it should be somewhere at your seat. To start with, these are the pictures we showed you a couple months ago. If you recall, this applicant came forward and amended the future land use map at that point in time from agriculture and different things to mixed use employment. And we showed you some of these photos. So some of these photos are from last time. Just again to give you guys orientation, this is on Highway 52, the farms on the right that we'd be rezoning. And as we moved up, again, we took some pictures at the Flume case so you guys could, again, get some lay of the land, understanding of the property. This, again, is on 52 to the right. This is the entrance of what would be the distillery visitor center, or maybe kind of the main hub of operation. And we're going to talk about access here in just a minute. But there's the sign that says kind of coming soon, distillery. And this is something we're going to talk about a little later, but there is an old house on this property that would eventually be renovated and become kind of the visitor center or kind of the commercial activity. So again, we're on 52 with the farm to the right. This is actually looking back to the east as we come down towards the recycling business. In the curve, you're seeing the farm on the right. And this is on Old Lancaster Road looking to the east. Part of this property is being zoned also as part of that. And you guys remember that's part of the Flume case. There's 4 parcels that were converted and 4 parcels that are being proposed to be rezoned today. This is looking at the farm straight on, again, off Old Lancaster Road. And then this is off Letton Drive, which ultimately is where right now there is a reserved right-of-way that a street access would go here, run into the east, across here, and this would provide the primary access into the property for the industrial component of the rick houses, the distillery, bottling, et cetera. And again, the main drive would be later on for the more commercial activities. But this is Letton Drive, looking kind of north, and again, this street connection would move to the east. And then this is Main Street. The farm is to the left. This is looking west, and that farm comes all the way down and touches Main Street. as you guys know. So we'd actually be zoning industrial right up to the edge of Main Street. This is looking the other direction, east on Main. And then this gives you kind of, again, a good orientation of the property that we're rezoning. It's kind of everything you see. Here's Main Street, but the property goes up and touches Main here. It's in 4 different parcels. It's the whole farm, minus this one little piece right here. There's a gentleman operates a business at this property, and I believe I saw him walk in. He's here, but we'd be zoning kind of everything around that, including this farm right here. So this is Letton right here. So we'd be kind of zoning all of this property is what's being proposed before you today. So with that, I'm going to jump into the staff report again and walk through some stuff that I think are procedural that have to sort of be built into the record. The applicant's here, they have legal counsel, maybe neighbors that want to speak in addition to that. So again, we had an application filed on January 2nd, 2020. You heard the applicant's LMD Holdings LLC. The property size that you see is 271 acres, 271.092. It's currently zoned, let's go to the zoning map right there. It's currently zoned agriculture, some commercial, and there's a little piece of single family up here at the piece that touches Main Street. So all 271 acres is being proposed to be zoned to light industrial. The zoning history, agriculture is the original zoning for the property. And again, it has 3 current zoning districts: agriculture, single family, and highway business. The future land use category, going back, is mixed use employment. And that's what you guys saw a couple months ago. The applicant came in here and changed everything that you see in this brown color. It was some of it was ag, some of it was low density, some of it was commercial. They consolidated the future land use map request to mixed use employment. And you can see in your staff report, mixed use employment, the category applies to a strategic mixed use area, mostly undeveloped, that are located near or designated industrial areas, employment centers, or industrial parks, and accessible for major transportation corridors. So that you guys approved that several months ago as a precursor to a zone change to get the flume in line with a zone change request. So I think it's not a surprise that they've come back forward to zone light industrial. That's a new zoning district designation that with the new zoning ordinance rewrite, we have 3 industrial districts now: light industrial, heavy industrial, and industrial business development. They chose the light industrial district, which fits a distillery operation with accessory uses that they're proposing. Page 3 of your staff report I think is pretty important, and we need to kind of get down in the weeds here a tad bit. But Article 310.3E of the zoning ordinance says, as a condition of granting of an amendment to the official map, the Planning Commission is authorized to require submission of a development plan. Further down in that first paragraph, it said, where agreed upon, the development plan shall be followed and shall be binding on all properties. And then Article 311.2 of the zoning states, a general development plan shall be filed with the application for amendment to the official zoning map in a recordable form in the Boyle County Courthouse. I'm going to stop there for just a second. Been some debate with the developer back and forth on what a development plan is or isn't. We see a development plan, and historically we got files full of zone changes. They're conditions. We use the word conditions loosely, but a general development plan are conditions that we lock down on the property in a recordable form with a zone change action. So what the zone ordinance says is we're supposed to get a general development plan submitted. Now that general development plan can take different forms. It could be a concept plan. It could be a list of conditions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. But we expect something to be submitted, so then we then in turn can record it and set some scope or some scale of what's going to be developed on the property as we move forward. Those happen at the zone change level, not really at other levels, permits or site plans. They need to happen at the zone change because this is when we're zoning property. We record conditions, we put them in the courthouse under a land use certificate, and they're locked into the real estate to assure what's zoned and what's promised is carried out on the property. Now in the past, those have been very specific in this town for maybe a daycare or a shopping center or a sign height. What we asked the developer to do is give us some conditions, gave them a general scope, which I'm going to mention a little bit, what we'd like to see on a property this big. They're fairly defined on what they know the use is, being a distillery and some other things. What was submitted is right there on page 3 of your staff report. We got one condition. that's listed as A, that says a future traffic study to be conducted if necessary as the development proceeds and as future site plans meeting the threshold are contemplated. That's pretty good. It basically says we'll do a traffic study if needed down the road. And we did ask for a traffic study, or them consider a traffic study, and we'll talk about that in just a minute too. I'm gonna put their concept plan up here too. They did turn in what I'll call a phasing plan. It's less conceptual than the last plan you saw that was in your packet. It shows different phasing that would occur on the property as far as farming, renovating the house, the distillery operation that shows a new street coming in, and then sort of tying in with the main entrance. And then we got a narrative, which was in your packet, and I won't go through that. That starts on page 3, ends at the actually top of page 5. So with that, I'll stop on that, and we'll get into these conditions a little bit more. But I'll tell you, we asked them to do a few more, and we sent a model out to them to consider as far as the type of conditions I think would occur on the property of this magnitude and this size, and we'll go through those in just a second. But the next step that we look at is on page 5. Obviously, the future land use map is a component of reviewing a zone change, but then so is our comprehensive plan, goals, and development review procedures. And on page 5, we did look at chapter 1, which is our goals and objectives, and you can see general land development goals on there, economic development goals, historic preservation on page 6, but I do want to point out these transportation goals. On page 6, we do have a transportation goal and several objectives, and the ones that we used are very similar to what you saw in the future land use map case. It does talk about improve the existing transportation system by upgrading existing roads to current standards when new development or redevelopment occurs. Talks about providing safe transportation movement by requiring developers to provide standards, streets, basically able to handle the traffic that they propose. Coordinate construction of new highways, obviously with the state. We know there's a new highway proposed here. And limit the number of access points along arterials and county roads. Those are the type of things we're looking for in conditions. This main entrance out here on 52, which I think is desired to be the entrance into the facility, either needs a state road improvement or the developer needs to improve it. And we need a commitment of that style before we can even agree to any kind of access happening on 52. I think short term, as you heard last time they got here, was that they would provide a street access off Letton, and this would be kind of the main way into the farm. They'd renovate the house, they'd maybe do bottling or build their distiller at some point in time. There'd be rick houses. Again, this doesn't really show what we saw last time, but our main concern is that we get a commitment that this is going to happen before anything else happens. Number 2, something's going to happen out here either by the state of Kentucky or by the developer, or that access is just not the main access into the property. So our goals say that. We need conditions that kind of assure that, and we'll kind of walk down the hill on a few others. Land use is down there at the bottom of page 6 that talks about our land use goals. But page 7, I think is something that's important that gets overlooked in our comprehensive plan a bunch, and that's in chapter 9. When we look at goals and objectives, they're fluffy, they're broad. We have a future land use map, but we have some specific policies in our comprehensive plan that also have to be addressed with every zone change request. Chapter 9 starts off with future land use map, but you see right there in the middle of the page, development review provisions. And it says requested rezoning, zone changes shall be reviewed for consistency with the future land use map and the development review provisions below. It goes on to say all zone change requests must be accompanied by a general development plan, including any of the following. It gets into some details of what we're looking for. But then the last sentence of that paragraph says, and all other development conditions requested by the Planning Commission and agreed upon by the applicant. Again, conditions evolve from the applicant's submittal, and at your seat, and sometimes somewhere in the middle. You guys can ask for conditions, you guys can suggest conditions, but this is when they're appropriate, is to have conditions related to the development at the zone change level as we review the comprehensive plan. None of this stuff is on the table when we're looking at site plans. The developers indicated to me that they would like to maybe look at their conditions more at the site plan level when they're down to maybe at the engineering stage. But unfortunately, with the zone change request, the challenge for the applicant is to show they're in compliance with our comprehensive plan, which is a future land use map as well as these policies. Goes on a little further. Not only do we have that general paragraph, but then we have specific policies, as you see on page 7 and 8, that relate to guidance for industrial development and guidance for commercial development. And as you know, there's going to be a little bit of both on this property. But the first development review policy that we have deals with the traffic study. And we did not get a traffic study submitted with this. Again, it talks about what the threshold would be, and we'll let them tell you why they think they're below that threshold, or maybe they're not. I would caution the commission a tad bit. We've heard a distillery case where we heard no traffic's generated, it's a handful of trucks, handful of employees, but then the catch-22, it's a tourism draw, or it's on the Bourbon Trail. I just met with another distiller, will tell you being part of that means hundreds of thousands of visitors a year, not just 5,000, hundreds of thousands of visitors potentially could enter and exit a site when it's part of a tourism draw, especially in this nature that we see in kind of this bourbon tourism aspect. That's the challenge we have, is clearly a bottling facility or a rick house is probably not going to generate the 500 average daily trips we need to do a traffic analysis. But at the full-fledged distillery that's a tourism draw clearly meets that threshold, and we think a traffic study needs to be addressed at some point. Now, they did submit one condition that they would do one in the future with a site development plan. I think that's fair, but I think, as I'm going to show you in a second, I think we need that condition to go a tad bit further, that if we don't do a traffic study, how are we going to access the property, and what phasing, and what magnitude, and what is the developer's responsibilities to make some improvements if the state doesn't come in, for example, and build that highway or improve Highway 52 in a timely fashion. The second policy deals with industrial development and being carefully selected, talking about testing the soil and doing some other geotechnical type analysis. Again, that would probably be more for a big manufacturing facility. We didn't get any kind of items of that nature. And then on the next page, talks about industries and industrial parks, access to highways, water, sewer, electric, buffers from highways, neighborhoods. Those are the type of things that, in my opinion, to meet these directives, there has to be a condition to match against, for example, a buffering. We talk about buffering and setbacks. Well, without a condition that says this is what we're going to do, I don't think these policies are being met. And then we get into the future land use map compliance, which again is a big component historically of what we look at in any zone change request. As you know, our goal is to see it doesn't comply with the future land use map. And as you know, the applicant did file that a couple months back, has made that change as we requested, and is showing that as mixed-use employment, which the light industrial zoning request would fit. So with that, I'm going to turn to the staff items of concern at the bottom of page 9. And we did send this out to the applicant. And again, we sent them a letter or a suggestion that they ought to think about some certain type of conditions. And again, we wordsmithed it to some degree, but the goal was to leave them open. They could fill in the blanks, plug in some numbers. We modeled these off very similar to the mixed-use zone change we did on Stanford Road. And these are general, in my opinion, except for the traffic-related ones. And they just, again, set a tone, would make the neighborhoods around there understand the scope of this development. And again, the conditions of this magnitude would be recorded and would have to be followed into the future for the property. So the staff items of concern basically are the written development conditions we followed. We suggested that the maximum lot coverage to be developed throughout the property be stated. That's general. Right now, the industrial zoning district lets you cover 90% of the property, an asphalt building, whatever. Clearly, that's not their indication. They showed you a concept plan. This is going to be green and open and agriculture. But without a commitment of that magnitude, you could cover this property 90% in an industrial style development. You could put a rock quarry, you could put a factory, you could put a asphalt plant. Light industrial opens the door to a lot of stuff. And we think at least they need to legislate on down some of the uses or disallowed uses on the property through some conditions. But setting a maximum lot coverage, let's say at 75% or 50%, we thought is reasonable. You're going to be able to develop, or if you want 90%, say 90%. But right now, by default, you could cover that property 90% impervious surface, roads, parking lots, rooftops, and that's fine in light industrial, but just give us an idea where we're going with this project. Number 2 talks about total building foot area. I suggested 700,000 square foot as a cap. I looked at their concept plan, the rick houses, the bottling facility, and I suggested on 271 acres, 700,000, but put in your own number, 800,000, 900,000, 600,000. Give us a cap that we can adhere to for building max on this property. We also said that you should commit to the buildings won't exceed 6 stories in height. And we think that's reasonable. The industrial zone lets you go 100 foot in height. The goal is to put rick houses. Give us a number on building height. Number 3 gets to the traffic issue, and it's kind of a big deal to us at the staff, and we were pretty specific on what we were looking for here. We put in that suggested condition, in lieu of submitting a traffic impact study with this application, the staff is requesting the applicant agree that total building footprint not exceed 100,000 square foot until a traffic impact study is submitted to the Planning Commission for review. The scope of such traffic study shall be defined by the City of Danville, the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and the applicant's engineer. Additionally, the staff has requested the applicant agree to the following statements. And we took some liberty here to say what we kind of expect to happen out on 52, which is basically if the state doesn't improve it, that there's no access coming off 52 until the developer improves it. And what we'd like to see at a minimum is at least a right, kind of right, left and right out. So again, if someday this becomes the major, let's go back here, zoom in here. So someday, let's say this becomes a pretty big tourism draw, and this becomes the visitor center, and this becomes the entrance. What we want at a minimum is that there be at least, that this driveway would flare out where we could at least have right and left-hand turns and the turn in. We also think there needs to be a dedicated left-hand turn and right-hand turn decel lane into a property that potentially is going to have thousands of visitors into it. So what our key here is we think this part of 52 is a developer's responsibility if the state doesn't fix it. They may disagree with that, but that's how things work in Kentucky and with planning and zoning. Unfortunately, we're waiting on the state, so it's a catch-22. Either the developer waits or the developer makes the improvement. But there's no way we can use this entrance in this configuration with the site distance that exists, the road configuration. This cannot be a main entrance into this facility. That's why the developer has agreed to come in off Letton and build a drive, and this be their primary entrance. This is exactly what we put in this paragraph to say, is that is your primary access until such time either the state widens and improves 52 or you do. We think that's a reasonable condition. I'll call it a deal breaker for the staff, if you want to call it that. And again, in the absence of a traffic study to counter that, it's hard for us to move forward and understand what we're really trying to do, zoning 271 acres and not make any commitments related to access on Highway 52. So we sent that to them to wordsmith how they saw fit. We didn't get anything in return back to us. The last few ones are housekeeping, more in nature. Tell us how big the signs are going to be, how many signs we're going to have on the property. They mentioned to the neighbors that were here last time that they would stay off the property on Main Street, and their concept plan shows a 100-foot vegetated buffer, but we want it recorded. We want it in writing. If that's what it's going to be, we want it to say a 100-foot vegetated buffer. We also suggested there could be some other buffers to the east, but they're going to stay in agricultural production. But we think if this is going to be a 100-foot buffer, there's a difference between a natural buffer and a vegetated buffer or a landscape buffer. So we want them to commit to something to protect that neighborhood and to make sure they stay back off that property. In addition, we got a gentleman that owns a business down in here that would be completely surrounded by an industrial development. Now, he's commercial, works on cars and lives there. We think some screening aspect ought to be worked out with that neighbor or committed to too. So some kind of buffering, screening. The zoning ordinance is going to catch some of this, but the applicant committing to those type of development standards that we think is important at this level in the zone change too. Also stating that we're going to be connected to sanitary sewer. We're in the city of Danville. We'd like a commitment to that any development on this property would be connected to sanitary sewer. And then the last two that you see there is we'd kind of like the applicant to state what the uses are going to be. Tell us what you're going to do or tell us what you're not going to do. Again, light industrial would allow anything just about, if you think about it. Body shop, vehicle repair, Jiffy Lube, adult entertainment, again, manufacturing. It's probably not going to be in any of that, but we don't know that unless the applicant commits to that in writing. Or do the opposite. Tell us what you're going to be. A distillery, rick house, visitation, whatever, townhomes, whatever your concept is, just give us some use definition. Tell us what you're going to be, or tell us what you're not going to be. We take it either way. But without those kind of commitments, we don't know ultimately what could happen. Now, a lot of people come into our office a lot and tell us what they're going to do or not do. Developers do it all the time, but you never say never in this business. They tell us what's going to happen on the property, and we believe folks. But what's the stop if we zone all this property light industrial? What would stop someone from cutting off 10 acres and selling it tomorrow, and there be a body shop there in light industrial? It's not their intention. It's not probably what the neighbors want to see, but what in this application that's been filed commits to that. Things change in the real estate business. Things change in the development business. We need commitments. That's why the zoning ordinance requires them. That's why the comprehensive plan suggests them. And that's the type of stuff we need. I don't think it's too much to ask to say there won't be any body shops or whatever, but we didn't get anything, but we'll do a traffic study at a future time. So with that kind of wraps up the staff report. The bottom of page 10 is KRS 100-213, which is your findings. And I think it's interesting, it's very clear how you guys have to review and make decisions on zone changes. You are to review those for compliance with the comprehensive plan, which is the future land use map, and is those policy directives, as well as the development conditions and the requirements of the zoning ordinance. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. Well, I'll mention one other thing. There is a document here from Vantage Engineering we put in your staff report. Again, this was a kind of a traffic analysis based on another distillery. I think at that point in time, we got this back in September when we asked for a traffic study or talked about one initially with the applicants. At the future land use map level, we were talking about traffic, and they had an engineer do an analysis to show what's kind of happening at the other distilleries, showing there's not a lot of traffic. It's pretty low impact. But at the same time, festivals, tourism, we didn't study any of those things. We didn't bring those numbers into this analysis, and I think that's the uniqueness of this use. It's not like just a daycare or a factory where we can look at trucks or look at employees. When you have tourism aspects, how do we study these numbers? We think a traffic study has to be done at some point in the future, or the applicant in lieu of needs to commit to those design issues on Highway 52. And the state's already got a plan in the works, and the applicant can pull in there and just pull that segment of 52 out that the state plans, and they can make the commitment that they will improve it to the state standards, and it'd have to be a coordinated effort with the highway department. But I think there's been a little bit of discussion as we don't fix state roads, or that's a state's responsibility. That's not how communities do developments, as you all know. The developer, under our plan and our policy, is responsible to make those improvements if the state does not. So that access is a critical issue for us that we think needs to be addressed. And a traffic study, I think, would help us get to the specifics of actually what we need at this entrance, or if we should even use this entrance at all. And again, we'd like a commitment, hopefully, from the applicant on this street connection into the property that's going to serve the development in the short term. Again, I'd be glad to answer any questions you guys might have, and the applicant's here with his attorney, and I think there's other folks here who probably want to comment on the project.
Questions for Steve from the commission? Hearing none, would someone from the property proposal like to address this issue? So introduce yourself, please.
Yes, good morning. I'm Matt Froberger. I'm attorney for LMD Holdings, and Francesco Viola, who's with me today. Lots been made of these conditions. The one thing that Mr. Hunter was remiss in telling you was they're not required. And for us, it's way premature. We're going to be coming back to you folks over the years, for many years, to ask for site plan approval. And we did give you a general development plan. If you look at the definition in 3.11, it hits it. That's it right there. They lay out they give you bullet points to let you know what a traffic plan should look like. General development plan should look like. Location and bulk of buildings and other structures. It's on there. Intensity of use. You can glean it from what we're showing you right there. Streets, ways, access points, parking facilities. Some or all can be in there. So we've given it to you. Now I know this may not be what Mr. Hunter's used to with large scale developments, but we're not large scale developers. We're in the distillery business. We own a distillery. We own a product. We're selling liquor. And that's what we need this property to do. But to agree to these conditions and handcuffs ourselves as we go forward, it's just an impossibility at this point. I can't tell you how much, square footage of every single building, right? I mean, we have general ideas in mind, which is what we're giving you. When we come back for the concept plans, site plan approval, you'll have control to say yes or no, or what conditions need to go on there at that time. As far as the traffic study, we're going to comply with all of your ordinances. The ordinance says when we need a traffic study. And this is way premature again. That's why we did the mini traffic study. It doesn't meet the threshold. But again, the conditions are not required. They're suggested, but they're not required. And these all may be good conditions, things we'll agree to in the future as we actually figure out exactly what we're doing, but it's premature now.
I mean, my intent is to take our time, do this right, and to incorporate all of you into this process. So as we go through this and we decide as we go forward what our plans are, we're going to bring it back before the board and have you guys take a look at it, and we do this together. I mean, the goal here is we want it to be safe for anybody that access the property. No, we don't intend on opening anything in the near future. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. If we get the approval today, we already met with landscapers and different people to improve the driveway coming from Lancaster Road on the property. We're going to start discussing the other road that's going to be coming from the left side and the left side there, and these things are going to take a while. So our plan is to begin landscaping as soon as possible. We want to get the trees in and get certain things around the house, along the driveways, so that they have time to mature. But this is a project that's going to take, what we have put together is 15 years. It's not going to happen overnight, and we are going to be working with you guys throughout this entire process. And so to put conditions on it just at this point doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us, because we're going to be doing this together along the way.
And we have conditions in the form of the zoning ordinance that has to be followed and that we're going to comply with. We have to foretell the future in order to agree to these conditions, and the ones that that Steve suggested.
And the state is more, from what we're understanding, the state's going to be improving the road there within the next 2 years. And, I mean, that's within our time frame. I mean, we probably won't have anything for the public for at least 2 to 3 years, maybe even longer, just because of what it's going to take to renovate the William Pro House. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with it. Had we gotten to it maybe 2 years prior, we could have maybe saved it and salvaged a lot more, but there's a ton of work that's going to be involved in that, and then do it right, and to do it within the historic guidelines. We have to take a lot of time to make that happen. And so our architects currently are they're working on the plans for that, and that's something we intend on working on in the next as phase one.
And so there's no misunderstanding. It's not as if we're saying to you that we would never be willing to agree to a condition. What we're telling you is that the condition is, agreeing to conditions are not required for a rezoning, and they can be done at the appropriate time. Some or all of these things that Mr. Hunter suggested may be appropriate and will make sense and would be something we agree to, but we just can't do it yet because we don't know yet. That's why it's a general development plan. It's not a site development plan because we're just not there. And to place those kind of restrictions at this moment in time, again, is premature. But not to say we wouldn't agree to improve that road at some point, not to say we wouldn't agree to hook it up to sewer at some point, not to say we wouldn't agree to burying the cables. I mean, all those things may make sense and probably do make sense, but it's just really hard for us to agree to something like that right now.
Mr. Froberger, while it is true that there's some wiggle room with regard to the way that you provide a plan, provide conditions, provide narrative in this application, that's true. I can see that. But you do have to satisfy the commission your conformity with the comprehensive plan. You know, the development plan, what Mr. Hunter has suggested, is just one way of kind of satisfying that there is that conformity, that there will be protection of surrounding land uses. But regardless whether you agree to the conditions that he set out, whether you negotiate different ones, that there does have to be something in place that satisfies this commission, and they have yet to speak on what will satisfy them, but you have to satisfy them that this will conform with the comprehensive plan.
So, I mean, that's what we're here for. Let's figure out what satisfies the commission.
So,
And-
if I may, the comprehensive plan, I put it in the narrative, I don't know if everyone had a chance to read this or not, but it sets forth the goals of recognizing and preserving the character and integrity of Boyle County and its cities, providing a growing diverse economic base of the community allowing for full employment of citizens. We've proposed a development of a distillery that will both bring, hopefully at some point, bring tourism. It'll bring an economic base to you in the form of taxes and employment. And it will bring just an overwhelming tourism effect. People will be drawn to the area as another companion distillery or make Danville a place to come. Again, I would move to make my narrative part of the record. I believe it is, and it specifically addresses the comprehensive plan and how it conforms. And I mean, it flies in the face of logic to suggest that this project would not be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. I mean, just look around your city.
So why would we not wait to approve this when you are ready to meet those conditions? Why approve it now if you're not ready to meet them? And how will we know that you would meet them in the future?
Well, currently I have an option on the property, and before I move forward on purchasing the property, I want to have the security and understand that it's going to be rezoned for the intended use.
So that's why you see an applicant of AFI LLC.
And I guess what we would want to know is to make sure it would be used for the intended use before we approve it. I mean, that's what I would struggle with. As Mr. Hunter mentioned, if we approve it blank check, we have no assurance what will go there or what it will look like. I mean, that's just what hits me as an individual, that we're approving a blank check in a sense, and I struggle with that personally. Steve, or Henry, you have any other thoughts where we are with that, or? Okay, thank you.
Sure, can I make a comment too?
Sure?
So, again, I think to be fair, yeah, I've worked in a bigger jurisdiction. This is the protocol, but when I was hired here, there's 8 drawers of zone changes here for Danville-Boyle County. Goes back a long history. Lisa and I look at them all the time. We've created a database. You can't find a zone change we've done in this community back 20, 30, 40 years where there's not conditions associated with it. It's been the protocol here. It's a comprehensive plan directive. There are development review policies I think have to be offset with conditions. You guys could choose just to use the flume as your basis for consideration, but there's more to the comprehensive plan than just the future land use. It is the policies. It is the goals and objectives. Zone North says shall in a recordable format. I don't see this as a development condition. This is a phasing plan. Their last plan was more of a conceptual plan. It actually had building rooftops, but we had no dimensional numbers. If this is what they're saying is their general development plan, I'll give them that. If that's what they say they want to record in the courthouse, I don't see how that protects the neighbors. That doesn't tell us what could happen at that little tag up there on Main Street. We're gonna have light industrial touching Main Street. At least they could commit to there'll be no development on industrial development on that section of the property. I think we needed more than this. I think the zone change we did on Stanford Road, interesting enough, that developer, that's the most recent, they did 9 conditions. They didn't do 20, they did 9 general with some flexibility built in them to give us an understanding of what was gonna happen on the property and the scale, the buffers, the signage, and mostly about the access. So that's what we're looking for. I don't think that's inconsistent with the history of this planning commission's expectations.
I agree with that, and I'll add that this development plan, as we might set it out today, is something that will be subject to amendment. If there's a fear of being handcuffed to a certain plan, if this is too much constriction, know that you can come back before this body and get some amendment to that plan.
So,
And I also would add that I think if we got those conditions, you would probably get what you're asking for, from my perspective, but I think we need to have more than we have now, just for my vote, personally.
Well, all due respect, you're asking us to do for you what we're asking you to do for us.
Exactly.
Take you at your word that you're going to
Exactly.
pass it for us later, but
Right.
we're investing an awful lot to do that. In order to pull the trigger on this option, we have to know that this is going to work out. And
So, just to clarify, what you're saying, is that if there are conditions, they can also be taken away if we come before you?
I think we can amend anything that we approve. Yeah, we can always go back and amend. Yeah, there's no issue with that,
what-
if we see reasonable need to do so.
I mean, what do we need to make you feel comfortable? I mean, for me, this is the use that we intend to use it for. I mean, there's no other ideas that are out there. I mean, this is the idea. I mean, I've been working on this, for 10 years now. It's not something that, I just thought of. It's been a long time coming. It has, family ties to it. There's, my kids' ties to it. They're excited about it. They're excited to be part of this. So, I mean, this is not something that's, just thought of. I mean, this is what we're doing. So I'm not afraid to say this is what we're doing,
Understand.
because that's why we're here.
So the intention is for distillery and associated uses of a distillery. We don't have any other intention than that.
If you look at the suggested development conditions, and you're the one's gonna be filling in the blank in terms of square footage and coverage and landscaping, I don't understand why this is overly restricting. I mean, you can go on the high side of your expectations, we're just looking for some type of definition.
Okay.
Well, I guess my response to that would be that, it is a restriction, because we'd have to come back to ask you to change it when we don't have any idea whether it will meet what we're looking for right now or not.
I guess I struggle when you say you have no idea that it will meet what you mean, setbacks, buffers.
Well, we're not,
Square footage, I mean, you can say, most I could ever expect to put on here is X many brick houses, and you know what that square footage is. If it exceeds that in the future, then we're fine with it. There's submitting almost nothing, and then ask for a zone change on almost 300 acres, so something that I'm not inclined to vote for.
Yeah. And when I hear you say we have no idea, that tells me you're asking us to vote for something you have no idea on. That's what I struggle with.
we do have an idea. I mean, it's not
Okay.
like
But
there's,
when I say I have no idea, I have no idea, you asked me, I'm an attorney, you asked me how many thousands of square feet we're gonna have in buildings for a future distillery and numbers of brick houses. It's a hard thing to project.
It's not a record.
I mean,
You can sit down in 10 minutes and come up with that square footage.
right, we have an idea. I mean, I could put together an idea. It's not like,
Okay.
it's, Matt does our legal side of things. I do all the
Okay.
planning side of things, so I mean, he might not have an idea, but I do have an idea.
I don't know, you tell, what's 700,000 square feet of building, is that one distillery or 10? You got me, so.
Somebody needs
It's,
to know that.
yeah, so I mean, we can discuss, I mean, which conditions are important to you. And, I mean, we're reasonable, we're not unreasonable. I mean, of course, we're gonna put a sewer. If we have anyone on the property using, water or
Well, I just
toilet,
think that's one of the
I mean,
things that we want in black and white is you're agreeing to connect to the sewer. We don't have that. I think those are the
of
kinds of
course,
things
we're
we
gonna
would
do
need.
stuff like that.
Well, I
mean,
know you say that, but
So the ordinance, the way I read it, allows for this back and forth between us, and there's no reason that I see we can't come to those agreements today on the record. Is there anything that, there's no requirement, it's gotta be in recordable form, the minutes of this meeting will be in recordable form.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says it has to be written down, so I think what Francesca's suggesting is we do a little give and take and see if we can find a common ground.
well, as Henry, I think so aptly put it, you've got to come forth with things that will please this commission and to get those votes. And for me personally, I don't see those things yet being presented that would please me. And I'm only speaking as one person, of course.
One way to do it might be to walk through Mr. Hunter's proposed conditions. If it's something that you find is incompatible with what you're trying to suggest, then say, let's not do this, let's amend this, but kind of go through those and see if we can pick and choose.
And I guess my question is, do we need to do that today or come back at another time when they've had time to sit down with Mr. Hunter and go through and then present to us? I don't know what's most efficient and best use of our time.
So for me, I mean, just to be completely honest, my February is completely full. And come springtime, my other company, Versatrans, is really busy. So this could, if we don't figure it out today, could be a chance it gets delayed till fall. That's what happened last year. I mean, our intent was to do this earlier in the year, and then I just got too busy. So, I mean, if you could work with us and we could go through it, we could try to figure something out quickly, and that way we can save all of ourselves time. And I would like to purchase the property. Everything's in place to purchase the property this February.
You have our blessing to go ahead and purchase it. We have no issue with that.
Okay, thanks. So I mean, if we could spend a couple minutes doing it today, would be,
Steve,
I'd appreciate it.
Well,
I think it's your all's decision. I think, again, I send them a model to work from. I think it sounds like it could be tabled, and even though you couldn't be here, an attorney can represent you. You don't have to be here if you have an attorney here that can speak on your behalf. We could table this, and they could come up with something that they could submit to me, and we could back and forth a little bit and get in front of you guys in your packets, so the next month you guys could look at this. Or we could have a special called meeting if that's what we need to do in a week. But I think there needs to be a little bit of back and forth. I'd like them to really start with something. I don't think it's really my place to draft their conditions. But I do want to mention, you mentioned the state's going to do that road in 2 years. That's not accurate. That project is on the state unscheduled or unfunded list. It has to get on the list to be funded to get in the 6 to 10 year plan. So I know it's a high priority project to get 52 improved, but it's not funded. And I don't know what's going to be done in 2 years. I think that's where we need something to talk about, how your access is going to be in years 1 through 10 as we're working on the house, we're getting construction traffic in and out, and when do we open up that access on 52? Either we're waiting for the state of Kentucky and we say that, or you're willing to commit to, hey, we'll go out and do something if they haven't done it in 10 years. I seriously doubt that road is going to be improved in the next 5 or 10 years because it's not even on the state's fundable 6-year highway plan. So we've got to have an access improvement there before you can use that driveway. And that is a commitment that needs to be very specific on the timing of access 1, 2. And then I suggested in the model I sent you all, I think we need to address access to Main Street. There is nothing that prohibits you right now to cut in the street right to Main Street. You either need to say we won't do it or it'll only be the state highway if they do it. But I think that's another one that we need some specific language or a concept plan with maybe a little more detail on it. There's a nice open area there on the left that we could do a 1, 2, 3, 4 or bullet, bullet, bullet that you could put right on that exhibit, and that becomes our general development plan with a little more detail. I think a back and forth over the next few weeks would be helpful.
Okay, so, the applicant, y'all have any more comments, please?
I mean, our plan is to use the driveway just as it's been used for hundreds of years. I mean, it's access to the house. I mean, if there was a single family living there right now, they could have people coming in and out. They could have construction crews. They could have landscapers coming in, and our intent, before it crumbles anymore, is to fix it and begin that process as soon as possible. I mean, if it continues any further, it might not be repairable.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would like to get it done today, but if we can't, we'll see.
Okay.
If Matt can get it done without me.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
This being a public hearing, anyone else in the audience like to speak in favor of this zone change? For it. Hearing none, anyone in the audience like to speak against this zone change? Introduce yourself, please, name and address.
Sally Bright, 3456 Lexington Road, Danville. And just want to say, I appreciate everything that Mr. Hunter's saying. I think he's absolutely right. Lancaster Road, as we all know, who live here, is very difficult right there where that property is. There have been a lot of accidents on that road. It's, It's not on the agenda to be fixed or anything like that. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to require a traffic study before going forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Okay, we will, just in a second, Jim. Anyone else from the audience? Okay, Jim, go ahead, please.
I'd like to say, I think most people in this room would love for you to have a facility there. I mean, it's good business to be next to residential areas, it doesn't disturb them. I hope the 52 access is a deal breaker to me. If you'll say you'll bring your access out on David Avenue until the state redoes 52, that would do it for me. If you'll say you'll do 52 if the state won't before you come out there, that would do it for me. We also need some kind of buffer on Main Street. If you'll say you'll put up vegetation buffer or something, that's the kind of conditions I'm looking for. And if you'll say our first phase of the development will be so many buildings in a certain zone of it for your bottling or your rick houses, that would do it for me. We just need some conditions like that. We want your development, we just want some assurance, and I also want a condition that you won't resell it for some other use, that it'll only be a distillery, because that's what sells it for me, that it is a distillery, and it is compatible with the underground.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the commission? If not, we will consider the public hearing closed, and at this time, the chair is open for a motion to either approve based on the conditions presented in the staff report or disapprove based on the conditions presented in the staff report. Anything, Henry, you need to add to that, please?
Or table it
Or
per the
table it,
request of the
exactly.
applicant, yeah.
I would make a motion that we table any action on this until two parties have a chance to sit down and see if we can come up with some type of conditions that Steve's comfortable with, staff's comfortable with, you guys are comfortable with. And then if it means we have to hold a separate special meeting, we will, to move it forward as quickly as possible. But at this point, I would make a motion to table.
Motion's been made by Terry to table.
I'll second.
Susie seconds. Question, discussion on the motion to table. Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. Thank you. Item number 4, under public hearings, Wesley Carter's file for future land use map amendment for low-density residential, moderate density residential and property at 313 Boffman.
All right, this hearing is as you heard, a future land use map amendment case. And very similar in nature. We're going to walk through the staff report. And just to give you some orientation on the property, we're losing our crowd, but that's okay.
Go
I'll keep
ahead. I
going.
gotta go here.
All righty. So this is Boffman. All you guys know where that is. This is Franklin, a short little city street with several residences on it. This is Aspen, and it kind of comes on around DANVILLE, and as you all know, this is the school. And as you can see, we've got some vacant parcels in here. This applicant has purchased this tract here. It's undeveloped, kind of in a residential area, and is asking for a future land use map amendment as a first step, obviously, to getting a zone change to a different district. Give you the different particulars real quick. This is looking down Franklin. It is a narrow street. There's nice houses on Franklin. This, again, is the actual future land use map, what I think is important. We're going to go out one more step. This future land use map is shown as low density, but you see multifamily and moderate density. And if you look in the general area, a lot of low density, multifamily, moderate density. You got the school here and even an industry right here. So, but what's closest to it, surrounded by homes, duplexes, mostly single-family homes, and then some vacant land. The applicant, this is the actual zoning map. So again, it shows it's zoned as single family, but as soon as we hit the backyards of these properties on Aspen, it actually is RM2, or what we allow is duplexes and single family. So the RM2 district allows single or duplexes, where the yellow R1A is single only. But at most, everything on Boffman is zoned the RM2 or the old GRB, which lets you do a single family or a duplex. And if you look, it's hard to see, but if you look at these addresses, you see sometimes two addresses on one lot. That shows you that there's a duplex there and versus single family. We got some old RM3 over here where we've done a development. And what the applicant again is asking is to change this from low density, which lets you go up to 5 units to the acre, to moderate density, which lets you get over 5, but not over 16. His desire is to do a development in there that would be single family. Make that clear. It would be a single family development, but would be going from the single family district 1A to a smaller district to allow homes to be developed on this property that would sort of be back in this area. Similar to the case we just heard, you know, at this point, this isn't a zone change. There's really not appropriate to have conditions, but the applicant's done a fairly good job here of submitting conceptuals, using an architect to kind of give you guys an idea of how this property would be developed. But today, what the application is to get to that flume amendment, if you see fit and see it's compatible, to get to a more dense development so he can do homes of this magnitude. So here's a picture of one of the kind of the homes with the floor plan. Here's some conceptuals that kind of show homes back here. Again, some of these might be hard to see. Some of these look like duplexes, but actually these would be done as patio homes, condominium units. There'd be a homeowners association is the concept. So all the units would be sellable units. People would buy their condominium unit. Some would be 2 stories, some would be 1 story, and some would be twins. So again, this shows kind of the concept. This is the first photo you kind of see of how the development would lie back here, in the acreage that sits back behind on those lots. Again, these are just conceptual at this point in time. All these were worked on by the applicant just to give you guys an idea of how he sees this development occurring. But he's got some process here. He needs a flume amendment to move forward to get to the density target. And then number 2, there would have to be a zone change in the future if this was successful. And there'd have to be conditions in the development plan. Again, this is something we'd be looking forward to see exactly the type of commitments. This is the property as it lies. Again, this is the actual plat that shows the property, shows the lots on Franklin and Aspen. We've got some other exhibits here that you guys didn't see. There is a gas line that comes across this property, and there's been a lot of kind of discussion and engineering preliminary to figure out how this could work with the gas line and access and water and sewer. And then, of course, here's the city's water and sewer map. This is almost top secret stuff. I think under Homeland Security, we're not even supposed to probably show that. But Earl got me that from the water department to give to the applicant because it shows, the blue shows where we have water, the green shows where we have sewer, the lines show where we gravity, where the manholes are. So obviously, this project would have to be on water and sewer. It'd have to be connected somehow. Drainage would have to work. We'd have to engineer around some infrastructure on the property. But then ultimately, we got to be compatible with the neighborhood. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is to make sure we're doing what we can to protect the neighborhood. But at this point, it's just a future land use map amendment as a starting point. Won't get into a lot of detail in the staff report, but very similar. Lots of comprehensive plan policies we laid out that, funny enough, we just all went to a smart growth conference, talked about this in some degree. There's the flume. We'll leave that up. A lot of policies sort of gear towards what we're doing right here, or proposing, which is an infill development on a vacant piece of property in Danville, where we'd be building rooftops on water, sewer, as opposed to building houses out in the county on septic tanks and whatnot. Several policies that talk about providing housing opportunities, affordable housing, infill development, compact design, flexibility in house design. All those are laid out on pages 2 and 3 and 4 of your staff report. And those are comprehensive plan policy directives and goals and objectives. I think what we see, if this came to fruition, are a lot of those things that our comprehensive plan is encouraging a developer to do, and especially trying to utilize undeveloped lands in the city whenever we can, as opposed to just sort of growing out in the county on the fringes. Our procedures with the flume are different than what you just heard on the zone change. That's on page 5 of your staff report. The applicant's challenge is he has to show that he is clearly compatible with the existing surrounding development as demonstrated. Again, a compatibility assessment is what we're doing here with the surrounding area. Interesting enough, our comprehensive plan by design doesn't define what the surrounding area is. It's not just the adjacent, it could be in general, but we say we have to be compatible in the surrounding area. Doesn't say half mile, mile, 500 feet. It's general for a reason, because there has to be some consideration to the general area. So we've got a lot of different uses in this part of the town here. I looked at some different densities. I looked at some different developments. We've got densities kind of all over the map as far as density ranges. You guys can look at Franklin. You could look at all of Aspen and Vale. We have a mobile home park here with hundreds of units on, I think that's approximately 19 acres. There's almost 130 units on 19 acres. We have some townhomes we've done up here. So again, in the general area, it's low density, it's single-family use. There's duplexes, there's manufactured homes, there's a church, a school. So it's kind of varied. But his idea is 5 units to the acre. He sees this development exceeding that 5 units to the acre. That's why he'd have to amend to the moderate density category to get units over that number. So with that, I'll stop and take any questions.
Where is the access for this? Is it the end of Franklin or is it off Bachman?
It possibly could be both. We're not sure yet. It still needs to be worked out.
And I can speak to that, if y'all would like. Look, my name's Wesley Carter.
Let me finish up.
Wait, let him finish.
Let me finish up here a second,
Need
Wes,
to
and then
go
we'll
to the
turn it over to you, so I'll show the planning commissioners what they're asking here. This is hard to see, but Franklin is a city street, and obviously the applicant, if the Flumes amendment, and he gets to the zone change level, he's gonna have to go talk with the city of Danville and make sure he can access this street, because again, Franklin's pretty narrow, it ties in here. He has access to Boffman right here, but there's a sinkhole in this area, but clearly he has 2 frontages, one on Boffman, one on Franklin. Right now, the street conceptually shows coming at the end of Franklin and kind of coming up here to a cul-de-sac at the break of the hill. But access could be developed if the city kind of forces that issue. There's really a discussion that needs to happen with the city. At this point, it's just setting the parameters of what the density, but at the zone change, there's a lot of questions about water, sewer access, fire department access, turnarounds, all those things would have to be worked through. But it is interesting to note the concept right now would be that these would be condominiums. This would be a private street with condominium units and an HOA association. So that would not be a city street that goes through there. It'd be a private street with an HOA, and you'd buy your condo units like Saddle Ridge or other condominium associations. So, and then again, the applicant's here, Mr. Wesley Carter, he can talk you to about what he wants. But again, as far as what we've got in front of you is a future land use map amendment. At this point, it still would need a zone change, engineering, city approval, kind of on and on at that point. But I'll be glad to answer any other questions you guys might have for me.
Questions for Steve? Okay. Hearing none, the applicant, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, sir. Good morning. My name is Wesley Carter. Is it all right if I take this off?
Sure.
Is that okay? All right. Awesome. Well, and 2, my wife Ariel and I are excited about the potential of this project, and we moved here in 2015, and I bought an Argyle Woods condo, and my wife fell in love with that area and just the proximity of it, the beauty of it, etc. We were fortunate enough and blessed enough to be able to buy an additional property up in the other area of that subdivision, but at the same time, it also generated a concept in which we really feel strongly about, and even my own counsel would tell me not to say this, but you know, where your heart is where your efforts are, and I have the opportunity to help provide higher education in this region, and in and through that, I've learned very keenly how difficult debt is, and especially how difficult debt is that's not backed up by an asset. To hear and see student loan debt and other forms of debt, revolving debt, and then to help multiple people obtain financing for homes that are $150,000 to $180,000 and get denied and not be eligible to purchase because of said debt or because of some other instance in their past. What we seek to do here is to build efficient, high-ceiling 1,000 to 1,300 square foot, 3-bed, 2-bath, all with attached garage, single-family homes. And actually, I do a lot of public speaking, but I normally don't get this nervous. You guys and gals are an intimidating bunch. But anyways, with regard to that, hey, man, well, I listened through the last deal. But and I do have one of our engineers here, Joyce Followell, who can answer questions as well. But our intent is to build nice, efficient homes that can be sold for less than $150,000. Ideally, a fair amount less than that. Our desire is to help people to have a very positive experience in this neighborhood or this association. And also, our intent is, the economics drive this land. It's only 4.2 acres. It's boxed in on all 4 sides. And if the dollars don't work, nothing works. And that doesn't dismiss large lots or anything of that nature, but with regard to this specific parcel, if we have the opportunity to develop it, there doesn't need to be extreme volume, but there does have to be a little bit of volume and a little bit of density in order to make the numbers work and in order to fulfill our goal of being able to sell these inexpensively. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you all for your time.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay. Anyone else like to speak in favor of this, please? Wait a minute. We'll get you. Anyone like to speak in favor? Hearing none. Anyone like to speak in opposition? Please go to the mic, introduce yourself, please, name and address.
I am Joyce Zinner, and I live on Boffman Avenue at 217. I am over by the school. I am in front of the school, well, at the top of the school, if you see it, I'm only 3 houses up from Franklin. And our problem with it would be the number of units. 36 is quite a few on that property. The gas line, of course. I don't know how you could put in the road with the gas line going across Franklin. Franklin is a very small, narrow road, okay? If you want to widen it, the houses will be right on the street that are on there already, okay? But the biggest problems I saw was the traffic flow, 36 more units if it comes off of Boffman Avenue, and even if it comes off of Franklin, eventually they have to go on Boffman Avenue because there's no entrance off of Franklin onto any other road at this time, okay? So they'd have to come back U-shape up to Boffman. With 36 houses, that's a lot of houses on that area, okay? We do have those condos that are already on Waveland that they haven't finished. You can see that brown area. They've done 1 row of them and never went any further, okay, as far as condominiums. The drainage right there, through there, it runs downhill, I think, onto Aspen. And when we have, with all the rains that we've had, it overflows all the time when we've had all that rain. And it also comes from the sewage. It comes up through there because some of the trees and stuff that used to be in those yards are no longer there because the water from the drainage, when we've had the storms, has basically killed those trees. Sidewalks, we were supposed to have sidewalks on Boffman Avenue. You put 36 more houses on there, people walking up and down the street, more people in the street, more chance for accidents. The sidewalks were never finished on Boffman Avenue. Almost 30 years ago now, we were promised sidewalks and never got them, okay? And then, of course, with the school, there would be the more problems with speeding. We get a lot of speeders going down through there, and they can check that out. That's all with the traffic flows. And then you have your sewage and you have your, whatever your hookups are. So that is our basic concern. We love having more neighbors, but maybe not 36 different units, which is as far as I think that they can put on there. I don't know. That's what we kind of figured out. But that's an awful lot to put onto that little area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
My name's Charles Hinkle. I live at 128 Franklin Avenue. Franklin Avenue is narrow.
You cannot get up and down the street with two cars at the same time. One has to pull over. You put 36 units in there, man and wife, that's 75 more cars running up and down a narrow street that you can't get up and down.
And Bob, it's not wider.
And my family has been on Boston Avenue since December of 1955. That's how long we've been there. And I don't care for somebody developing it, but if you widen, you have to widen that street. I mean, there's no way around it. You widen that street, my sidewalk step is 21 feet from the step to the street. You make a street 3 foot wider, I got 18 feet. My next door neighbor ain't got but about 12 or 14 feet now. You make it 3, he ain't got 9 or 10 feet to the front, you know, to his front door, to the street. I mean, you gotta have more than one way out of there. And I heard about a sinkhole, I never heard that before. On the other side, you gonna build a street over a sinkhole? That's not a good idea, in my opinion. You know, and I say the property needs to be developed, but you gotta do something. You can't, you know, you can't widen Franklin Avenue. One side's got telephone poles on it. You're gonna move 20 telephone poles? You know, I just wanna know what's going on. I hadn't heard 36 units back there. That's a lot. You know, I heard 5 acres, you know, 4 acres, what it is. To me, that's 4 houses. 4 houses wouldn't be bad, a house for each acre. You know, that wouldn't be 2 people could get by on it. But when you got, you know, maybe 75 more cars running up down the street, now, there's something not right there, in my opinion. You know, and then when she mentioned the sidewalks on Balkan Avenue, my dad give him the property. There it is. But they told him he had to, if it snowed, he had to shovel it. He said, I'm not getting out there and shoveling. You know, you won't build it, you take care of it. That's what happened to the sidewalks on Balkan Avenue. There's an argument over which side of the street it's gonna be on. You know, I know all about that because I've been there for so long. But, you know, I heard what was going on. I don't know. I was just trying to find out what was going to go on back there because I've seen people run out. My driveway is where everybody turns around at. You know, big trucks, mailman, whatever. They all turn around in my driveway because you've heard the last house on the left? I'm in the next to the last house on the left, you know. So that's the way that is, you know. But I just wondered what was going to go on back there, and I got this letter and I wanted to see. But, you know, Franklin is just too narrow to be running another 75 cars up and down it, in my opinion. You know. But thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know, but we never received.
Go to the microphone, please.
I'm sorry. We never really received a letter of any sort. I had to call to find out when you all were meeting, so.
Okay.
I'll explain that to her real quick.
Okay.
The state law just requires us to notify everyone who's adjacent. We actually sent a lot of letters, so by law, we just send everyone that touches. But as you know, we have to put signs on the property. We put one here and there, and we have to put an ad in the paper and post on our website. So not everyone gets a personalized letter except the ones that touched it, and they did, and you're here, so I'm glad you're here. I would also mention I'm glad both these folks are here, and I think we might have talked on the phone. I'm not sure. Maybe it was a gentleman at the end of the street called me. But I want to make sure y'all know this is what we're calling the future land use map amendment. This would just allow the density to be more than 4 units to the acre. Franklin actually is over 4 units to the acre. The houses aren't on 1 acre, a little smaller. But the next step, if this was successful, would be a zone change, which then gets right to access, driveways, drainage, possibly Franklin. Would we use it? I think we've communicated to the applicant that even though this is their desired plan, the city's really going to control that outcome to some degree. It might be they have to use Baughman as their access. We just don't know that yet. It's a tad bit premature. This just gets them to the next step to be able to zone it, and everyone would have to come back again. It'd be a full-blown hearing with a lot more details and conditions like you heard in that first case. They'd have to have kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, talk to the city about water, sewer, access, fire trucks, on and on. But at this point, it's just getting it more dense as far as this map goes. Thank you.
Could anything larger than a duplex be?
Well, what's interesting, again, if they zone to the 1C category, the patio homes, actually they could be 4-unit patio homes, but they all have to be designated single-family development. We can't do rentable duplexes. They would actually have to be patio homes. They have to designate on the plat or the condo plat that they'd be single-family units only, which then triggers our single-family definitions. They could be 2-unit structures, but their desire, as you saw in that concept, is mostly 1-unit structures with a couple twins in there. But the desire here is not to make this a single-owner rental neighborhood. This would be an HOA association, condominium association. But again, that's stuff we would hope to see at the zone change as a specific condition, that there be an HOA and it be designated. But the 1C category restricts it to single-family only.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned the fire department or
Ma'am, let
the,
me make one thing. You can't just keep going on and
I'm
on
sorry.
and on and on. You gotta say everything you wanna say, and then
I'm sorry,
that's
it's the
it.
first time I've ever done this, so.
I'm just sharing with you.
And he brought up another issue, which was the fire
understand.
department coming down the street. It takes up the whole width of Boffman Avenue practically. So I don't know if you'll have enough space to put a fire department truck down the road, okay?
Thank you. Any other ones want to speak for this or against this issue? Anything else?
If I may, again,
Quickly.
Wesley Carter. I too know my heart. I own 137 Franklin Avenue. I've probably turned around in your driveway, sir, and I know that it is narrow. The property in which I own, 137 Franklin, we even used it and are using it as a concept to help guide the homes in which will be in this development. And two, with the luxury of owning that property, it gives us some ability to widen some aspects of that road because I am in control of some of that land. But I would like to let my engineer, Joyce Followell, just speak a little bit. I know a matter of sinkhole came up, and she's a civil engineer with KWM Engineering. Thank you.
Morning. I'll try to keep this fast and
Introduce
brief.
yourself, please.
My name is Joyce Followell. I'm a civil engineer with KWM Engineering and Surveying.
Thank you.
Thank you. I personally have not been to the site. Our survey crew has been there. My boss has been there. I have been told that there is a sinkhole in the margins of the narrow access to Boffman. I do have past experience with sinkholes. I actually did research on that in college. Sinkholes, to have a roadway near a sinkhole is dangerous because a sinkhole is not what you see on the surface. A sinkhole is an empty hole underneath of that surface little dimple. So to have a road access there is a safety concern. So that's why our initial concept would be to come off of Franklin. It's not very visible. I should have made it yellow. But yes, comes off of Franklin, then dips around and comes over the gas line. It's a common practice for gas lines and roadways to cross one another. Happens all the time. There's no other way for gas lines to go across the country. It just happens. We're accustomed to designing around them. You pay attention to the depth of the gas line, and you make sure that you don't impact that. It's not unusual. We've also, in part of our concept, was to have open area on the south side along that south fence line. That's where we would do storm drainage, retention, infiltration, so that we do not impact or increase the runoff from our development at all. Because we are going over the high point, which is approximately where the gas line is. We are also leaving open space to the north side to do storm drainage and retention and infiltration. So we're looking at open space along the south side, open space along the gas line. We're not talking to put houses right up on that gas line. Nobody wants to. That'll be a nice place to walk your dog. Maybe a picnic table. Same thing on the south side. On the north side, you know, have a nice little dog park, dog run, or walk area, open spaces. Not a lot of people spend time out in their yards unless they have a dog in a little bitty fenced-in yard. But, you know, with these open spaces, it gives them much more opportunity rather than having a 50-square-foot yard. You know, they've got access to a much larger area in which to walk their dog, have a picnic.
Okay.
Any questions engineering-wise?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Falwell, could you speak generally to Mr. Carter's proposal and whether you think it will impact or exceed the capacity of public infrastructure in the area, roads, sewers, et cetera? I know we're preliminary right now, but in terms of what is possible to be developed there, do you see it as exceeding the capacity of infrastructure in the area?
Based on when I worked at Division of Water, sewer application actually, when they put in sewer lines in a particular residential area or inside of a city, they actually size those pipes based on what is the capacity of the land. What is the possible or potential for this area? And so it makes sense that they would have designed it for that potential for to have been developed already. So there's no reason for me to think that we would be pulling more water than is available or overloading the sewer system in any way. Because it is in the middle of town, they would have designed that area to have been filled already.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'll say, I talked to city engineer this morning, again, Mr. Earl Coffey. There is capacity, he's verified there's water and sewer. The challenge the applicant's got is they got to get to the sewer, and then the water may need to create a loop to get the pressure they need. There's capacity, but the pressure may have to be looked at, but the sewer has capacity. It's an access issue at this point that the developer would have to explore. And they need to work with the city on that.
Other questions? Anyone else like to speak? Hearing none, we will consider the public hearing closed. Chair is now open for recommendation to approve, deny, or table.
I just have one quick question.
Go ahead.
I guess. And Steve, let's say that the sinkhole says that you can't have access on the Bachman. And if we do approve this, then the city you start working with the city, how does the city determine how many spaces can go on that if they determine they can't widen Franklin? Is that something that the city engineer says we can't allow?
Yeah, I think they probably ought to be talking with the city before the zone change gets pretty far down the road and work through some of these issues. I don't think the city would restrict the number of units. The city might set a standard of either improve Franklin or your only access will be Baughman. So there's gonna have to be some discussion with the fire department and the city of Danville Public Works. And if Danville says Franklin's just not gonna work for us, you have to use Baughman, they're gonna have to figure out how to mitigate that sinkhole problem. So there's definitely challenges on this property as they move forward.
Any other questions for Steve? Or
I can't ask no more.
you can ask a question, just no more testimony.
Well, I mean, you got, all right, well, you want me to get up here?
Yes. Yes. We're trying.
No, you got the sinkhole, and you're going, in Franklin Avenue.
Sir,
But,
just ask the question you have.
okay,
We're not
all right.
testifying anymore.
all right, well, I just don't know how you're gonna widen it. I mean, I don't understand that. I mean, it's just, there's no room there.
Okay, well, I don't know that it's our responsibility to figure that out.
Well, I know, I don't
Yeah.
figure it is,
Right.
but you're gonna have to me, if you're gonna have, if you fill the sinkhole, whatever, you're still gonna need a loop in there to come out. You're gonna use Franklin Avenue no matter what,
We're gonna have to let
You
the
know.
city engineer work that out,
you know, so I just,
if it's approved.
Yeah, all right.
It's not approved yet. All right, officially closed. No more questions. Hearing is over. All right, now, floor is open for a motion. Or the Chair, Jim,
I make a motion to approve the proposed future land use amendment based on the testimony and documents presented in the public hearing. Proposed zoning amendment will be approved. Second. I'm not.
What can you read,
And I want to add a comment, Wesley, I think we ought to approve the plume because it's the next step in looking at development of that property. I think you got a great idea with high density affordable housing for Danville. So it costing you, when you come back, you saw what those people went through with conditions. We're gonna have a lot of conditions. So I guess just my original vote.
Which I second.
we good with that, Henry? Need to add anything?
Yes, I appreciate Mr. Boyd kind of talking through what's going on. For the sake of the public who've shown up today, this is not a zone change. There's still another hoop to jump through. The development is not happening just yet. And I would add to your motion, if you accept, that the criteria under which you're moving approval is compatibility with the surrounding area.
You okay with it, Jim?
Okay.
Second, Steve, you okay with that? Any questions or discussion on the motion to approve as presented? Hearing none, all in favor? Vote unanimous. The chair is going to invoke executive privilege here, and the chair is going to appoint a temporary chair, because this chair's got an appointment that's got to be made immediately. So Terry, if you don't mind, I'd like to appoint you as temporary chair for the rest of the meeting, if you would accept that, sir. Okay. I'm okay doing it that way, Henry? Thank you, sir. I apologize, but I do need to leave immediately. I need to leave 15 minutes ago.
And for our temporary chair, if it's okay, under new business, if you could do the budget flip, I'd like to talk to the neighbors real quick and tell them what the next process is and how they'll be notified, and get that one lady's number. So if you don't care, then I'll come back and do the other two.
So you've got number 3.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go speak to them.
Today, not what came with your packet. With the handout, there's a page that looks like this. It's just a single page, and it says DANVILLE-BOYLE County Planning Commission. It came out, it was on your desk when you walked in today.
Yeah.
And so, the Budget Committee met with Steve. Steve's proposing that we have a budget amendment number 1 this year. And so all I'm doing here is doing a condensed version so you can just see the changes. You can go through this more really quick. So first we'll talk about, so if you go to the top of the page, we're going to look at revenue first, and you can see that the budget this year for revenue was $184,600. And then I've got listed there the changes that are being proposed, and that we're going to increase the amount that we are expecting to get on construction review fees, and that's primarily from the sidewalks that we heard about Jody funding, which would be $1,000. So we're increasing our expectation for subdivision plot revenue by $1,000. Zoning permits by $10,000. We've got a bunch of small zoning permits. And then land use and recording fees, these are just pass-throughs, money we collect to pass through to the county. There's more activity there, so we're expecting to collect another $1,600 in land use and recording fees. And then there's a bunch of small ones that amount to $100. So the revised budget for this year for revenue would go up to $198,300, which is about a $14,000 increase. Then if you go to the right, we'll just look at expenses. Budget expenses were right around $195,000. The big increase in expected budgeted expenses is to bring in another part-time seasonal intern in the spring to work with Steve on modifying the flume, the future land use map, and that would be $2,400. And then the $1,600 that we talked about under revenue, we then have to pass through to the city, to the county. And so expenses will go up by the amount that we collect and then pass through. And then there's some other pluses and minuses, and so the overall expense would go up to $198,000. So those are the proposed changes, and if you go down to the level below that, under fiscal year 2020 budget, you can see the budget we had started the year with about $82,300 in beginning balance. That's the way the checkbook before we started. There's the budget revenue, the budget minus budget expenses. So we thought we were going to end the year with about $72,000 in reserves. And if you drop below that, what we were going to use those reserves for was a 1% operating reserve, and then to save about $54,000 for legal construction reserve. If you go to the column to the right that says budget amendment number 1, these are the new numbers. So again, the beginning balance actually went up once we did our final audit and closed the books for the year. So we actually ended up the year with about $86,000, almost $87,000. I guess you would say the checkbook, further than about 83. And then there's the amendment revenue, the amended proposed for expenses, and so the ending reserves would be about $86,000 or about a $14,000 increase. And then if you drop down below that, the only thing we really need to talk about here is the city-county reimbursement, because that's new, of $15,000. And what's being proposed in this budget amendment is that unless things change quite a bit, probably by the end of about third quarter, around March, Steve would be issuing a check of about $7,500 to the city, $7,500 to the county, to reimburse for the fact that between our starting balance being greater and our overall revenue being greater, that we would basically keep our operating reserves about where they are and then reimburse the difference back to the city and county, with the understanding that the city and county still intends to fund us at the same level next year that they did this year, around $75,000. If they don't commit to that, we may or may not do the reimbursement until after we see what we're funded at. But those are the changes. And I guess we do need a motion and a second to go ahead and adopt the proposed budget amendment number 1. Okay, so you make a motion to adopt?
To approve?
I'll second.
Okay, any second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. The other point I just want to make is that the budget committee will be starting to work in the next couple of weeks on the preliminary budget for next year. We're one member short on that committee. If one of you would be interested in joining the budget committee for next year, now would be a good time to do it. Talk to Steve or me or whoever, and we'll be sure to include you in those meetings when they start in the next couple of weeks. Okay, next item on there, I guess, is the personnel committee, which is.
I'm on the personnel committee.
And do we need to go into executive session for personnel committee? Oh, you're right.
Okay.
Do we need to go into executive session?
No, the personnel committee, we've only got one of our personnel committee members here. They met in December to deal with some housekeeping items. An intern we had, and an intern we're hoping to get, as well as some personnel stuff related to Lisa's pay and benefits. They were minor, and they met in December, and those personnel items were in your packet for consideration, and just would want you all to ratify those. Susie's here if you guys have any questions. Jerry stepped out, and Jeffrey was also at that meeting. That's our personnel committee. I'm glad to answer any questions or discuss any items you might have.
I'm kind of new to all this stuff, but, you know, and I'm still waiting. I haven't gotten a copy of the personnel policies. It wasn't in the original, so.
Yeah,
you can just
I sent it to you, okay.
I'm trying to understand the language you're using. You know, we've hired some interns, or we have some interns work for us. We've had some work for us and are now gone. And the personnel committee approved all that.
Yeah.
They approved hiring people and paying them. That's not the commission's responsibility.
Well, the intern one of the interns, we agreed and hired and put money in the budget back in July. And that intern is still on the books, technically. She's back in school, but we had her come back at Christmas and do some hours, so basically me and Lisa could take some time off, and it's slow around Christmas, and had her doing a housekeeping project. And she's back at school, so we sort of ended that one January 15th. She was already on the books, and we sort of set, what we do in the budget, and Terry's already walked through, is we have an intern slot, part-time slot. We fill the budget that way. The allocation of funds are through the budget, so we need to stay in the budget cap. The actual hiring and firing of staff and employees is vested in the personnel committee with your all's consideration. An intern, though, is as simple as bringing them on board with your all's consideration. And again, we've got an intern that could come on starting February through a partnership with Center to do some projects for us. It's a good deal for us to get a college intern in and pay them at a nominal rate, get some projects, as opposed to back in the day when we had 3 full-time staff and spent.
But we're using the word consideration. Is that approval, or is that just we're looking at it?
Well, the personnel committee gave me the green light to at least start talking to the professor, talk to the student, and then.
One, and paid them, I assume,
Yeah,
since January 10th, from January 10th she left?
about 15th.
Okay.
She's gone, yeah.
But that's already been done.
That one's gone, yeah.
So we're not approving something that's already happened.
You are in that case, because we did actually bring her back for just a couple weeks.
But I'm saying that period has already passed, that we would be saying approving it? I'm having trouble
Yeah.
following.
Well,
We're approving approving something.
Well, the timing of this one's just tough because they met in December on the 10th, and you all didn't have a December meeting. So we're bringing it to you now. Typically, you would have saw this the very next week. These are a tad bit in the rears because you guys haven't met. So you're confirming what the Personnel Committee's already put forward into motion, and now it's at your desk to approve.
So, but the answer, I don't know if I'm getting the answer that, or an answer, I guess. The personnel committee decides if we pay and hire someone, and all we're doing is saying, yeah, that's good, or that's bad.
They decide, yeah, they decide if we're hiring. The Budget Committee decides if we're gonna put any money in the budget to pay people.
Okay, so
It's kind of a
personnel
joint.
policy says the commission doesn't decide if we hire someone.
You all don't get to make the recommendation. You don't get to do the interviews. So here's, what again,
Do we decide if they're hired?
well,
The
it,
personnel committee, makes the recommendation
To the
and brings
commission.
it to the whole commission for them to,
right.
So we're
Normally
having
confirm.
input on a hire,
right.
but we didn't on this one.
Well, but let's, look, we're gonna have to get down in, again, the weeds a tad bit. The problem is, and use my position, when I was hired, the Personnel Committee interviews me. Personnel made an offer. Personnel Committee, we had to negotiate.
Sure.
At some point, you all had to approve my hire.
Right.
So there's timing in there where at some point, they technically make the hire, made an offer, we were back and forth with a contract, and eventually something ended up in your all's packets to approve. But we were pretty far down the road at that point. Now, you all could have said, no, we're not gonna hire him. But unfortunately, we were already we were negotiating a contract for 2 months. And so they do sort of make the hire. If you think about it, they made me an offer on paper with your all's blessing, but you all typically don't do that to the tail end, right before we all say we're gonna hire him.
So we wouldn't hire, the commission hires you. I mean, even though they work through all the details.
Commission would hire me.
The commission hires you. This person was hired without the commission's approval. Is that correct?
No, she was hired with the commission's approval and back in the summer.
Last year?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
not for this period.
No, yeah, she was an intern for the year, and we just had her come back for a few more weeks.
She's been working before December.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She worked the whole summer, all the way through Labor Day. Yeah, she worked starting in May in the last budget year. She worked the entire summer, and she worked through Labor Day. Then she went back to school, and then,
You just extended it.
yeah, we just,
Well,
yeah.
This looks like you hired someone.
Well, it says approved intern agreement, so technically there's an agreement that we, we have an agreement with every intern, and we say what days you're gonna work, when your term is.
But she's already basically been here.
Yeah, she worked a couple weeks over Christmas, yeah. And she's gone. And then the new intern would start in February. Unfortunately, Center's already sent me the paperwork. Can you do this? She's had to register for class. So there's a lot of protocol that had to get this in place before we can get the intern in the building and work the term. This one would just be from February to graduation and would come in here and work for us on these zoning conversions projects, hopefully. And then the last item related to Lisa's pay and some holiday pay days off related to some issues that the Personnel Committee did for her. So all that unfortunately kind of is in arrears, but again, we didn't meet in December.
And you all approved that, I mean, but we just go with generally what the personnel committee recommends.
Sure. I would understand that. I just wanted,
Sure.
I was curious whether or not we had any say-so in approving or not. But apparently, if she was already hired, so it didn't make any difference.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure you knew she came back for a couple more weeks. And then we always look at our number of hours we're using a year, and I think the budget reflects that too. We actually amended the budget to reflect the new intern coming on board for the remainder of this fiscal year.
So in practicality, the whole commission nearly always follows the personnel committee's recommendation, but technically a person isn't hired until the full commission approves it.
Hired or fired.
Hired or fired.
That's all with that.
Yeah.
I thought
But again, it's misleading because, again, you might send out a hire letter or an offer letter before you all ratified it. It's just how it works out in the hiring process. Now, in the future, if you guys want to, everything they do have to prove kind of incrementally before then you all approve it, we can do that. But typically, they meet on some big ticket items, personnel grievances, discipline, and make some decisions that we're always going to bring to you guys to make sure you're in the loop through these action items. Some you approve, some you just just note them.
Sure, okay. Any further questions on the personnel committee? Not, we need a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Second. All right, all in favor? Great. So unanimous. I think that's all the
Well, number one, did you do it real quick? I'll just, real fast. The advisory committee met too, and that's Susie, Jeffrey, and Jerry, and I'll just real quick tell you what that was, because I just hate to say it, but we're punting on this one. We were asked to consider an amendment to the zoning ordinance we just passed, dealing with rickhouses and distilleries, to allow them to be a permitted use by right in the ag district. Some of the distillers here in town have some concerns about having to go through the zoning protocol and like to just be considered, if they're just doing the rick houses, they could just be agriculturally zoned. We looked at that proposal that they gave us from Nelson County and looked at it and considered that really that directive ought to come from the city or the county, since it's their ordinance, and we just amended the ordinance. So the city and the county have met with Jody and some other folks, the mayor, the judge, distilleries, some EDP folks, to talk about this idea that would we consider changing the zoning ordinance to allow distilleries to kind of go out there in the ag district without zoning them, like you heard earlier. We were kind of mixed talking about, but we also thought the city and the county, if they want us to amend the ordinance of that magnitude, we would take a directive from them and go from there. So we met briefly on it and decided to sort of punt it to the city and the county and see what they tell us to do. And that's where that process is right now. The city and the county are thinking about changing the zoning ordinance as it relates to storage and rick houses in agricultural zones. And we made no formal comment on it other than just to look at it. The advisory committee is the one that looks at all the big documents before they end up at your all's desk. And then lastly, just to finish off, and it goes to some of your points, Steve, the committee assignments we're going to do next month. It's next month we elect our officers, and our committees aren't all full right now because we've had some changes. So all our committees can have any number, 3, 4, 5. We have a budget, personnel, advisory committee. Some of those only have 2 members on it. So next month we'll ask you guys if you want to serve on different committees, personnel, whatever. If that's something you're interested in, or technical review, we can make some of those adjustments for all the members that want to participate on these committees. And we'll look at those next month. So.
Motion to adjourn?